When it was announced Donald Trump would be attending Super Bowl 59 on Sunday, February 9th, 2025, just weeks after taking office as the 47th President of the United States, it was historic news. Not only because Trump has a controversial history with the NFL, since criticizing Colin Kaepernick and other players who took a knee during the national anthem during the 2016 movement to bring attention to racial and social injustice, and not necessarily because his attendance would put him in the vicinity of musical superstars and noted Trump critics Taylor Swift and Kendrick Lamar, but mostly because, surprisingly, Trump will be the first sitting U.S. president in history to attend a Super Bowl while in office. This might sound shocking to some, given the big game's overall reputation as a key piece of annual Americana, but perhaps it makes a certain sort of sense, given the unique security concerns and challenges that must be involved at a large-scale sporting event such as the Super Bowl. In general, sporting events, particularly those with a patriotic or international bent, have long been widely considered to be tempting targets for terrorism, with several real-life events, most notably the deadly hostage crisis at the '72 Munich Games, sadly confirming those concerns. The fear has been explored, some might even say exploited, in cinema, with a number of movies playing on the idea, including 1976's 2-Minute Warning, about a sniper at a football game, 1995's Sudden Death, a Die Hard riff with Jean-Claude Van Damme as a fire marshal taking on robbers at Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, the 2008 British drama Incendiary, which follows the aftermath of a suicide bombing at a soccer match, 2012's The Dark Knight Rises, featuring supervillain Bane bombing and then staging a public execution at a football game, and 2018's Final Score, another Die Hard riff with Dave Bautista as an American former soldier battling Russian separatists at a London soccer game. But, if you'll allow me to speculate, perhaps the films that potentially most influenced concern about having a president at the Super Bowl are two from Paramount Pictures, starting with the 1977 thriller Black Sunday, based on the 1975 novel by Hannibal Lecter creator Thomas Harris, and directed by legendary filmmaker John Frankenheimer. The film is about a terrorist attack at the Super Bowl. In fact, incredibly enough, producer Robert Evans managed to secure unprecedented cooperation with the NFL, and scenes for the film were filmed at the actual Super Bowl X in 1976. Likewise, the film also secured the full cooperation of the company Goodyear, who allowed usage of all three of their US-based blimps for the production, as the film's story concerns a Vietnam vet suffering from PTSD who is seduced by a member of Black September, the Palestinian terrorist group responsible for the 1972 Munich massacre, and convinced to embark on a suicide mission of flying a Goodyear blimp filled with explosives into the big game. The title, Black Sunday, while on one hand a play on the day the Super Bowl is traditionally played, was also a direct reference to the Munich massacre, and if any audiences or critics of the time were upset about the film using the title and Black September in the story, it ultimately didn't hurt the film too much. It was a modest box office success, and then a cable TV staple for many years to follow, which might help explain why over 2 decades later, Paramount was willing to undertake another adaptation of a novel about the bombing of the Super Bowl. Though, to be fair, in this case it was yet another entry in an already established series they had previously been adapting into a hit movie series. And while the film version this time would remove the book's direct references to the Super Bowl and instead opt for an unnamed football game, one in which, it should be said, the film's fictional president is in attendance, the movie would still retain the novel's most shocking, unexpected twist, giving the film an extra level of edge that not even the real-life tragedy-inspired Black Sunday had dared. The year is 2002, and Paramount Pictures are ready to reboot a popular spy thriller franchise with a new, younger leading man at the center, and in the process hopefully launch the next big phase of a successful franchise with The Sum of All Fears. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. And I'm just glad I live in a world where geopolitical tensions aren't high at all, and where lies aren't being perpetuated by neo-Nazis for the sole sake of global destabilization, and I'm definitely sleeping well at night, knowing this movie is so far-fetched.
Ooh, we got a hot one this time. We got a hot one. Yeah, this is interesting. You know, we always like to say, we often say at the beginning of our episodes that like, oh, this is going to be like a really special one. You know, particularly when we're starting a new theme, which we are here.
Yep.
But this is the first time ever that our podcast is either, well, depending on your mood, it's either a like a stunning element of proof of the cooperation between citizens of enemy, like, you know, nations, and like the fact that the people can overcome their leaders, or this is a example of enemy collaboration and just pure, like, you know, like, as you said, like international conflict, just born real here at the podcast. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe during the discussion we'll ebb back and forth, but these are crazy times in the world, which we'll talk about, and it's just so, it's like so, I guess, great for us, but also just odd that this is the movie we're doing.
We always like to say that we schedule these movies way in advance.
Yeah.
Like this was planned, I think, in the fall time of last year.
And as we said last time, right, we told a little story about how, like, I kind of had to fight for this. It was my idea, like, just for the pun of the title, which we'll talk about in a second, and you were kind of hesitant. Boy, I bet you're glad we did it now, aren't you? So.
Yeah, thanks.
I had my finger on the pulse, man. I knew it was coming.
Extremely poignant, and you know I love my matrix theory. I love my my simulation theory. But oh boy, this not like this, you know, like to pick another Matrix reference. Anyways, yeah.
So I guess we should explain our new theme. Our theme for February is this isn't a regular February. No, you're entering FebruaRYAN. And that is a month dedicated to.
First of all, I hope that you're proud of yourself. That's all.
I am. You know what?
Proud of yourself.
I am proud of myself. You know what? And you can't take it away from me. I'm on a high, but just about FebruaRYAN, not about everything else involving my citizenship and everything. So,
yeah, we'll get to that.
yeah. But no, this is a month dedicated to the Jack Ryan franchise. But in particular, of course, because it's our show, the two Jack Ryan movies that failed to start we could say a franchise within a franchise, right? This is an overall film franchise, but twice they tried to reboot it, and both times it failed. And those are the two we're looking at, starting with this episode's movie, 2002's The Sum of All Fears. Chris, why don't you tell us about it?
Sure. Directed by Phil Alden Robinson. He directed Field of Dreams. Funnily enough, Ben Affleck was a extra at Fenway Park. Yeah,
I saw that, yeah. Which I don't know.
You're stepping over my Boston accent right now?
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Ben Affleck was in Fenway Park.
Yeah. Did he pack his car in the garage when he filmed that?
Wow.
I don't remember ever seeing him in that movie, but I guess it's not like I was looking at the extras, you know.
Of course.
So.
Based on, of course, this is based on the novel by Tom Clancy. It is written by Paul Attanasio. He wrote Donnie Brasco, Sphere. He actually is the creator of, I think, one of your favorite shows, right? Homicide: Life on the Street.
Yeah, a show that I suggested to you and some other friends, and a show that just recently went into streaming on Peacock, but a show that I still maintain in terms of like network TV, I think is the best cop show of all time. It's great.
Yeah. That's what's his name? Franz? Daniel Franz? No,
you're thinking of NYPD Blue with Dennis Franz.
Dennis Franz. What's the ass shot? Is that Dennis Franz?
Yeah, that's Dennis Franz.
Okay.
Of course, that's what you remember. You were as hot for Franz ass, you know.
Hey, I was I don't even know anymore, but I was gonna reference Bianca Censori for the Grammys, and I don't even.
No.
What are we doing anymore?
Yeah, I know. Everything is awful right now.
Everything's awful. Okay.
Yeah.
This is also written. We don't want to forget him. Daniel Pine. He's an '80s TV writer. He wrote The Equalizer, that spawned a film series starring Denzel Washington. So we will never cover those movies. Miami Vice. He was a writer on there. We did cover Miami Vice, so go check out that episode. Doc Hollywood and Any Given Sunday, so he was a writer of those.
Yep.
The budget of The Sum of All Fears is $68 million. Domestically, it made $118 million. And worldwide, Trev, almost $200 million. So this is actually a big hit. Yeah, huge hit. So surprising why it didn't continue, but we will for sure get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. That's always interesting. Sometimes I like those conversations more, right, where we just kind of have to put our thinking caps on a little bit and say,
Same.
like, well, what went wrong here? Why didn't they move forward with that? And I have some ideas. I'm sure you do too. But yeah, also interesting. And I'll just say this now. This isn't a spoiler for my review or anything. But the fact of this kind of movie making almost $200 million definitely shows a different time period. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because we don't even get movies like this anymore. And the fact that this was a big hit is interesting. And I can't wait to talk about that as well.
So I gotta ask you, Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan, the series. Sometimes we do our spin-off show, Success to Series, and when we talk about why these franchises really worked, I think we're gonna touch on that a little bit in this episode, and probably next episode too, when we look at Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit, starring Chris Pine. But I guess without going too much in depth and kind of not creating a Success to Series here. The Jack Ryan series, to you, I know is quite special and slightly poignant, I guess. Hey, you're a fan?
Well, I'm a fan, yeah. I mean, I guess maybe we should define it first, right? Just in case anyone has not seen any of them or has only heard the name and doesn't really know what it is. Because I think it's always been the kind of go-to explanation of it. It's like America's James Bond, but I don't know. That's like the easy answer, but that's not exactly right. That's kind of like too simplistic, and it's not what these movies necessarily are. I get why people would make that comparison. They're spy thrillers to a certain degree. But the big difference with Jack Ryan is that he's not a special agent. He is always depicted as a CIA analyst. He is just an analyst for the CIA, and kind of the point of most of the Jack Ryan stories is usually some kind of international terrorism threat is afoot, and all the higher ups are wrong about it, and because of his analytical skills, Jack Ryan is usually the one who has the right answers. Right? He can look at what's going on and figure out what's the truth, and he has to try and get through to his superiors and tell them, this is what I think is happening. And because of that, he usually gets plucked and put and like reluctantly thrown into action. Like he gets sent on these missions even though he doesn't want to. But he's very much often depicted as a man kind of out of his elements. He is a former soldier, but he was like his back was like broken in a helicopter accident, and so that's why he got a desk job after that in the CIA. And so now whenever he's thrown back into action, he kind of it's reluctantly, he doesn't want to, but obviously he always rises to the occasion. And so that's the Jack Ryan kind of mold, right? He's different than Bond in that he's not a gung-ho, yes, I'm gonna go kill everyone. That's not what he's looking for. He's like, no, I just know, I can understand geopolitical conflict and the motivations of all these people. So when you compare that to like the approach to James Bond, it really did seem to be saying, well, the American version about that, and again, this is very funny to think about today, but it's almost like, well, I guess the American answer to James Bond is we'll do a series that trades more on intelligence, right? It's the idea of the super smarts being the heroic element and not necessarily the action. And
just Jack Ryan as a concept is like a full-on slice of Americana, like... He's got a wife and children, he's not a philanderer. He doesn't rush to go in guns a-blazing. It's very much, let's solve this by talking. Let me sit at my desk. Let me run some analysis on the situation. Let's really put in the, like you said, intelligence work of the CIA. And I think that's what is interesting about him as a character and what adds a certain different flair to the films that I've seen, right? Like, I have seen those original films, 2 of them actually quite recently, because we did a Noyce-vember looking at Philip Noyce films last November, and Philip Noyce directed 2 of them. So I thought, you know what, let me finally get to these movies, and it will help me as well to go into this FebruaRYAN.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to put it into terms that like the entire world can understand, if James Bond is James T. Kirk, then Jack Ryan is Jean-Luc Picard.
Totally.
Wow. Okay, good.
I got that reference, but it's because I've been tortured by you for 10 years. So yeah, good.
But yeah, no. So in terms of, and I'll try to do this as quickly as possible, as I always do. But honestly, I've never read a Tom Clancy book. I will say, like I'm obviously familiar with them.
That absolutely shocks me.
You would think that, but and yeah, I mean, working in bookstores like for such a long time in my life, and like just being a huge reader, I guess you would think maybe I have, but they are very big, and very intimidating when you look at them. And I was also always very aware, like the thing I always heard about them, even from a young age, was that they're very dry, right? Spy thrillers are kind of a tough read, you know. Even like I love the Bond movies, but I've read some of the Ian Fleming books, and some of them are okay, and some of them, you know, the spy stuff doesn't translate to the page amazingly well for me sometimes.
Right.
And I know the Clancy ones, his whole thing is like super specific realism, right? So he'll spend like 10 pages describing the inner workings of a bomb, you know, or if a character's getting in an aircraft carrier, he's going to tell you all about the duty shifts and the different compartments on the aircraft carrier. And it feels like it probably just bogs down the narrative a little bit. So that's just it's a world of like dad fiction that I never got into. But you mentioned that I'm a fan of the series, and that's definitely true on the movie front, because I absolutely love 1990's The Hunt for Red October. The John McTiernan film, the first Jack Ryan movie with Alec Baldwin as Jack Ryan, and of course Sean Connery as the Russian submarine captain who's trying to defect from Russia. Just an amazing, you know, what do you call it? It's kind of, I guess, a thriller, right? You don't even want to call it action because there's not that much action in it, but it is just full of tension. So well directed by John McTiernan, great movie. And then, yeah, as we said after that, we don't need to really litigate the whole like why Alec Baldwin was replaced, but he was. And so for the next two entries, 1992's Patriot Games and 1994's Clear and Present Danger, he was replaced by this guy. You might have heard of him, Harrison Ford. Not too shabby himself.
Yeah, Callista Flockhart's husband, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's how the world. Right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
big McBeal fan right here.
That guy with the earring.
That crashes planes.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Hey, it's a sensitive subject right now.
Oh yeah, right. Hold on. Wow. More. Everything is terrible. Everything is terrible.
Yes. But I like those two quite a bit. Also, I think Hunt for October is the best of the three, and I actually prefer Baldwin's like version of Ryan to Harrison Ford. I think because Harrison Ford is just so Harrison Ford, you know, like you kind of want Jack Ryan to feel like out of his depth a little bit, but when you see Harrison Ford, you're like, well, that guy's just going to kick everyone's ass and win, right?
He's just like so commanding. You know, completely commanding. Yeah.
But those are still two totally serviceable, again, like dad movie thrillers, those two as well.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, going on to make the Sum of All Fears, you know, we had to replace Harrison Ford, and that's kind of where we're at here. Just real quick before we get into our Man of the Hour, because I think we should speak to where Ben Affleck is in his career at this point.
Yeah, and before we get into that and talk about the Man of the Hour, our new leading man, Ben Affleck, Chris, I actually wanted to ask you a question about this, because I know, as you said, you were kind of you just checked out some of these Jack Ryan movies more recently, and I think you would also consider yourself like, you know, somewhat of a fan of this franchise. But I was curious because I said that, you know, James Bond is obviously like the British, you know, version of this, like the British hero, the classic British hero. And then Jack Ryan has very much been sold as like the American James Bond. But then I think about that and go like, I don't know, I think maybe Jason Bourne is more the American James Bond. And then like later we even had like, you know, Jack Bauer, at least JBs, James Bond, Jason Bourne, Jack Bryan. But
Jimmy Fallon.
But I'm curious, Chris, am I missing a Canadian like super spy hero? And if not, are you upset that you guys don't have one of these? Like, where's the Canadian franchise that has like a hero like this?
If there is one, I feel bad if I'm not going to remember or even think of one. But yeah, I don't know if we have one. It's not really in our DNA. Like, it's just kind of, I think nobody thinks of Canada and thinks of their, you know, intelligence agency. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they don't think of the FBI is the CIA is all straight up Americana, you know?
Yeah.
And the spy world, the secret spy world, I mean, MI6 and the James Bond series has completely commanded that. So, especially I think because we come from British territory and stuff like that, I think we kind of co-opt James Bond in a weird way. Sure. Especially like our sense of humor, right? Like Canadian sense of humor is a little bit more cheese, and it can be pretty dry. So that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought, and I feel bad, Chris. I feel bad that you guys don't have, especially as we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on between our nations right now. I feel bad that you guys don't have like your own Jack Ryan, your own James Bond. So I've talked it over with both Hollywood and just the governments of our countries, and they've allowed me to make this declaration. I am officially granting you guys that you get to have Austin Powers because he is played by Canadian Mike Myers. So.
5. I'll stay.
I suggest you hit, sir.
I also like to live dangerously.
As you wish, sir. 20 beats your 5. I'm sorry, sir.
Well, I won't lie to you. Cards are not my bag, baby.
The UK has agreed to give up Austin Powers, and Canada can have him. So there you go.
And you know what? That's fine. And that's sort of where my brain was going the entire time without even mentioning him. I was like, is Austin Powers ours because of Mike Myers?
Yeah, I mean, you might as well claim it, right?
Yeah, we can have that. You can have the Love Guru.
Man,
yeah.
I misplayed my hand here.
You really did. You really did. So, okay, I will gladly, happily, and excitedly take Austin Powers as ours.
Okay.
Are we going to write a crossover now? Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah, I'm getting right on it, yeah.
Netflix just gave us $200 million.
You hear me opening up ChatGPT in the background.
Okay, let's talk Ben Affleck here. Because Harrison Ford basically just couldn't do the next movie. There was some issues with the studio and getting the rights with Tom Clancy because Tom Clancy wasn't happy with Patriot games. He wasn't happy with that.
Every time they made one of these Tom Clancy adaptations, Clancy did not like the previous one, and he kind of like hemmed and hawed, and it was always the same story. If you look them all up, it kind of reads the same way every time, where it's like he was so unhappy with the last adaptation, and he didn't like the script they had, and he was just not going to let them do it. And then they sat down and talked to him and gave him a bunch of money, and he said, "Okay." It just finally gets to that.
Jeez, it's kind of like a negotiation that I'm thinking about that's been happening between our nations.
Strange, isn't it?
Wow.
But as you say, like this was initially planned to be the third Philip Noyce Harrison Ford entry, but just like the Clancy delay and some other elements kind of kept pushing it off to the point where neither Noyce or Harrison Ford were available anymore. So rather than wait around, they decided to just kind of look for a new leading man, and that's where we get to our man of the hour.
Everyone's asked you the same question about the casting process.
Right.
When Harrison's schedule didn't work out.
Right.
Was there ever a thought to hold off on the movie? Or did you...
The thought was, I'm not going to do another one of these. Because Harrison was out, Philip Noyce, who had directed 2 of them. Actually, I'd done 3 films with Philip. We're all pals, love to make movies together, and they were off doing what they were supposed to be doing, working instead of trying to develop. Because we worked for a year and a half, and so I kind of threw up my hands, and I said, well, I'm the sole remaining survivor, and I'm going to go off and do something else myself. And then within about 2 weeks, Paramount called and said, Ben Affleck's agent just called today. We're very excited. He heard that the Jack Ryan part was open, and he'd love to come in and talk to you about it. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Ben's, 28? And Jack Ryan has already become president of the United States, and then kind of a light bulb went off, and I said, that's the rookie Jack Ryan. That's the young Jack Ryan. We start this thing all over. Just forget we've ever made, that I've ever made another Jack Ryan movie, and I'm sure the audience will too. I mean, the last one was out 8 years ago. And boy, does this open up our story possibilities. It's easy to get him out from behind the desk. All we have to do is give him a mentor and thrust him into a difficult situation.
Yeah, Ben Affleck steps up and talks to the producers, and he's interested. And of course, he's not the right age. So Mark Neufeld I know you just heard that clip, listeners, but Mark Neufeld almost sounds like he invented rebooting, as if it's never been done before. But that's exactly what is going on. We're going to reboot Jack Ryan for a younger audience, a younger vibe, a younger demographic. And, you know, one of the hot stars of the time is Ben Affleck. And I'll say right now, before we get into like where he is, I'm going to talk about like kind of just my overall thoughts right now, Ben Affleck. I am a huge proponent of Ben Affleck. I love the guy. Ben Affleck seems to me like he's like a blue collar guy that like hates being a star. And he's just like a normal dude like all of us, and you know has his demons with like, you know, drinking or gambling again like all of us. And he just kind of like wants to go to work and make his art and go home. And I think he absolutely
drop Dunkin' Donuts all over the place.
Yeah. I think like him and, you know, Matt Damon, of course, you know, they go hand in hand a lot of the time. I just really like those two. Matt Damon less so with his crypto bullshit the last couple of years, but Ben Affleck to me just seems like such a pure soul of a dude, and I am rooting for that guy. And he's going through another divorce again, and that I thought those two crazy kids would make it this time, but
third time's a charm.
True.
Yeah.
He seems to be a loving, you know, a father as well, which is cool. So it's nice to always hear good stories. But
plus,
yeah, no,
plus you're such a proponent of his, and you love his choices so much that you got the exact same dragon tattoo on your back that he has.
like that was a bad decision. But like I said, Ben Affleck is like all of us. Okay.
Yeah. You give a bad breakup, and you know you just.
Yeah, you've made some poor life choices. But no, I really like Ben Affleck. I think he's a great actor, despite what people, you know, some people have said. I do just love watching him on screen. He's a real movie star, as we like to say. And I think he really carved out a nice spot in film history with his directorial efforts. Less so the latest one with that Nike one. That just seemed like a we got to get paid today movie, which is fine. Everybody's allowed to do that. But I think he's carved himself quite a special spot in Hollywood, in my opinion.
I'm actually going to save my thoughts on Ben Affleck as a performer till we get into the review, because I actually want to tie it into my thoughts on this film in particular.
Sure.
But I will say that without getting into my thoughts on him as just a performer, I'll say that where I come with you is that I've just basically, since he arrived on the scene, I've consistently found him to be one of our most interesting movie stars.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
in terms
definitely.
of just the career he's had is fascinating to watch and to chart. And when you say to chart with him, that actually means something, because you are charting a career. Because you mentioned he's a guy who seems like he doesn't want to be famous. That must be right, because I've never seen somebody torpedo his own career as many times as he had. This is a story of many comebacks and many falls again. And I always think that's more interesting than someone who just becomes a star and stays a star like a flat line, or like goes away and never comes back, or just has like one comeback. The fact that Ben Affleck keeps being like out for the count, right? And then you go like, he's done. And then suddenly it's like, oh my God, he came back and now he's a director and he's in Oscar contention. Yeah. Or it's like, he'll never be like another like bankable Hollywood leading man though. And it's like, oh, here comes Gone Girl. You know, and it's just like, you can never quite count him out. And I think that's what makes him fascinating, because it's just ups and downs. And yeah, I think the friendship of him and Matt Damon is very fun. They're funny guys together. They have like a really good chemistry just in like, you know, all their like press stuff together and everything. And I also he's one of the celebrities, and I know so people have different thoughts on this. And again, this can tie into all the larger things going on in the world right now we talk about, but people hate when celebrities talk politics. But man, Ben Affleck is like really, really intelligent about that shit.
Very.
To the point where he is like one of the ones that you really wish would entertain running for office, even though he says he doesn't want to. And it's like, that's too bad, because you're one of the ones who seems to really get this shit, you know, and is like really studied on it. It was not surprising at all for me to hear that he actually kind of chased after this role a little bit when he heard it was open, because he was a huge fan of the Tom Clancy books. And he seems like, that fucking 14-year-old nerd was probably reading Tom Clancy books, right? Because he was already so interested in like, you know, geopolitical, international history and everything. So I think he went to school for like, to learn about like Middle East history, because he was just like fascinated by the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. So yeah, just a smart dude, an interesting dude, and a fascinating career.
When you read this, I mean, you had a full understanding what you were doing, and you wanted to do this part.
Yeah.
when you read the book or the script, I don't know which came first for you.
The book.
The book.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you knew exactly what the movie was about.
I knew what the movie was about. I've been a fan of the movies that they made, and I've read all the Jack Ryan books. And I felt like, and when I initially heard about it, I thought, well, how could I do it? You know what I mean? They're at a different place. I'm too young. It wouldn't work. I'm not Harrison Ford, blah, blah, blah. You know, that there was all that baggage, you know, and everything else. And then they told me that they were going to go back and kind of do like an origin, talk show Jack Ryan sort of when he started out, and when he didn't have all the answers, he didn't know exactly what he was doing, and he was a little bit green and a little bit new. Then I thought, this is like something I can do. I can play this, and it gave me a lot of confidence. Obviously, I also went to Alec and Harrison and kind of sought their blessing and talked to Tom Clancy at great length, because I wouldn't have done it without some encouragement from those guys as well.
So you did? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think it's important, you know, out of respect for the guy who wrote the book, who created the character, and for two fine actors who I respect enormously, who played it very well, I think. You know, and it was important to me.
What did Harrison say when you asked him?
He said, I think it'd be great, you know, have fun. He said, give me a call afterward, we'll compare notes. And he said, you know, he was just very, very kind and very sweet, and you know, we talked with some off-the-record conversations as well. And, you know, he warned me of some pitfalls that he knew about. And, you know, for the most part,
movie, pitfalls?
well, just in general with like, you know, this stuff to look out for. And I'd be doing him a disservice and his confidence a disservice if I revealed them. But he was very kind, and he was really... very helpful, and I told him, look, you're my hero, man. You know, if Harrison Ford was doing this movie, I'd be buying a ticket. It's just that simple. So, you know, it was like that. I just wanted to, you know, check it out with those guys, and for selfishly to have the confidence to do it, to know that the guys who had done it before thought I could.
Yeah, and his impeccable Spanish. It's unbelievable. I think he speaks better Spanish than J-Lo. So, but yeah, let's chart this career a little bit, especially right around now. Can I start? Like, I guess we'll start with Chasing Amy. Can we say like that's when?
Well,
I know
I'm not going. I'm not going to let you start with Chasing Amy, because that is Dazed and Confused erasure, and I will not allow it.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
He is a standout in Dazed and Confused as the bully O'Banion. He still one of my favorite Ben Affleck performances. I know he had like a little bit of he goes frustrated because early in his career he felt like he was typecast as a bully because he went right from Dazed and Confused into Mallrats. And I believe for Mallrats he actually like auditioned for Brody, and Kevin Smith is like, no, you should play Shannon because you should play the bully. And he's like, man, really? I just did that. but it's just like there was just something about him that had the look. But yeah, so Dazed and Confused and Mallrats, I think people were already taking notice of him. But of course, Chasing Amy, in terms of like an on-screen, you know, star is probably where it starts to pick up. But obviously there's a much bigger movie in 1997 that is really what gets it all going.
Oh yeah, I mean, Good Will Hunting is an outstanding film still to this day. It's just a beautiful movie, and he writes it, and he wins.
Yeah, the beautiful
for it.
story too, right? Of these two kids, these two friends writing this little indie, getting Robin Williams to be in it, you know, teaming up with noted good person Harvey Weinstein to get it out into the world, and win some Oscars. But
we're reminding everybody of just bad
all
things.
the best in this episode.
It is literally the sum of all of our fears. I have not seen Phantoms. I know he was the bomb in Phantoms, but I got to. I know it's on my Prime list. I got to watch. But the one what really hit for me is the very next movie in '98, Armageddon.
Yeah,
this movie is a goddamn banger. This is Bruckheimer and Bay, like just. I mean, an explosion of thrills. Yes. this movie. I got a buddy that just recently rewatched it with his wife who had never seen it, and I think they watched it like last week, and he just could not stop texting me about it. That movie still gets me to this day. I just absolutely love Armageddon.
And for the Affleck of it all, like you can never take away that with Armageddon he delivered one of the best audio commentaries of all time. Just trust me, folks. Just head to YouTube, look up Ben Affleck Armageddon commentary. That is a thing of beauty alone.
I asked Michael why it was easier to train oil drillers to become astronauts than it was to train astronauts to become oil drillers, and he told me to shut the fuck up. So that was the end of that talk. He was like, you know, Ben, just shut up, okay? You know, this is a real plan, all right? I was like, you mean it's a real plan at NASA to train oil drillers? He was like, just shut your mouth. See, here's where we demonstrate that, because Bruce is going to tell the guys that they did a bad job of building the drill tank. He did a piss. See, he's a salt-of-the-earth guy, and the NASA nerdonauts don't understand his salt-of-the-earth ways, his rough-and-tumble ways.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's because your cans are all...
Like, somehow they can build rocket ships, but they don't understand, like, what makes a good tranny.
We've had them training for 8 months solid now. 8 whole months? Well, pretty much, yeah. Oh, gee whiz.
Like 8 whole months, as if that's not enough time to learn how to drill a hole. But in a week, we're going to learn how to be astronauts. Oh, 1 whole week? Now you know how to fly into space? I need my guys. Why do you need them? They're the best. Everyone's the best. Why are they the best? I don't know. They just are.
I'm only the best because I work with the best. If you don't trust the men you're working with, you're as good as dead. You want to send these boys into space? Fine. I'm sure they'll make good astronauts. But they don't know jack about drilling.
I mean, this is a little bit of a logic stretch, let's face it. They don't know jack about drilling. How hard can it be? Aim the drill at the ground and turn it on. You think it's just drilling a hole? There's a lot you gotta know about. And when you're gonna snap off an edge in the tranny on a corner of a hot pipe, and you're gonna get a gas pocket. Like, yeah, well, what about when the booster rockets don't fire and your EVA suit and your zero gravity, you know? Didn't you see Apollo 13, boy?
Can I take this opportunity to make a personal plea to like Criterion and Disney? I guess particularly Disney. Will you finally allow Criterion to put out a 4K Blu-ray of their Armageddon set, like DVD that they did a long time ago? I've been holding on to my Armageddon Criterion DVD for years. This bullshit standard def, not even anamorphic DVD, because it's the only place that has the Armageddon director's cut, which is longer, but I actually like some of the extra stuff. So I'm still waiting. That's why I've never bought like a blue of it, because I'm like, come on, eventually we'll get there, right? But just been holding off on it.
This just in, Disney says fuck you.
Oh, damn. That's what I get for that's. Is this because I didn't watch Echo and Agatha all along?
Okay, but this really cements Ben Affleck as like a leading man, one, but especially like a romantic lead.
Yeah, well, Shakespeare in Love too, right?
Yes.
So it's like, yeah.
Like
Same
that.
year, yeah.
Forces of Nature comes out with Sandra Bullock.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now we're
with Gwyneth
Bounce.
Paltrow.
I mean, this guy is. Because I want to bring that romantic side up because of what we're going to be talking about this movie and kind of how they shape Ben Affleck as Jack Ryan. So I just think with these movies and then going into Pearl Harbor as well, he is that romantic lead that will get dates to go to movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not just the guy action star. He's the guy that you bring your girlfriend to go watch the movie with. You know what I mean?
But again, if we're going to talk charting the career, I think it's also very important to mention here, right? So again, let's look at this filmography and let's consider it for a moment here.
Sure.
And that the fact that in 1997, he has Chasing Amy, Going All the Way, and Good Will Hunting. Okay. In 1998, he has Shakespeare in Love, Phantoms, and Armageddon. In 1999, he has Dogma, Forces of Nature, and 200 Cigarettes. In 2000, he has Bounce, Reindeer Games, and Boiler Room. 2001, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Daddy and Them, and Pearl Harbor. That's 4 or 5 years in a row where he's got 3 movies every year, right?
That's wild.
So we also have to remember that he had this like very, very sudden acceleration and like being thrown out into the world as a megastar.
Yeah.
But also people started to get sick of him right around very quickly because he felt so overexposed very fast, and he also became a tabloid figure very quickly. Yeah. So it's kind of like that double whammy of people are getting sick of him because he's in the tabloids, and we're seeing his face on movie posters and at the multiplex like too often, it felt like. And it felt like, I think a lot of people thought Ben Affleck was being rammed down our throat a little bit around this time. And that definitely plays into, I mean, Pearl Harbor is also just a bad movie, but
yeah, it is.
And then kind of like Reindeer Games in 2000, also a bad movie. So he started to have some stumbles there as well. And whenever you have those slight stumbles, those could either be just slight stumbles, but if the world is already getting sick of you, they will really hold it against you. And you really saw the press turn on him and start being really mean about him at this time too.
And I think this is where we get to without going into our thoughts about like this film, right? This is kind of the reason why there is no more Jack Ryan movies with Ben Affleck. It's like think of it this movie. Like Sum of All Fears does really, really well, but then he goes on 3 bombs. Okay,
Yeah.
Daredevil, Gigli, one of the all-time bombs and tabloid makers of all time, and Paycheck.
Yeah.
And then Jersey Girl, actually. Jersey Girl bomb too. Fuck, you got 4 there. And Jersey Girl's not a bad movie, but I think there's 4 they're just huge stumbles. Huge stumbles.
I mentioned earlier, you are a busy man. Changing lanes this year.
Yeah.
You just shot a movie with Jennifer Lopez. Gigli?
Gigli, yes.
Gigli, what a name.
I know, that's the name that nobody can pronounce. So I'm not
Well,
sure
it looks like Jiggly, Gigli.
I know, so everybody says kind of like, so this movie, Giggly, Jiggly.
And then you also shot this movie called Daredevil, which was based on the Marvel comic book.
Yeah, which was a lot of fun. That was a comic book I read as a kid, and it was sort of a, these playing Jack Ryan and playing Daredevil are sort of flip sides of the coin for me in terms of things I've always been a fan of growing up. And with Clancy, when I got the Clancy book says I got a little older, and Daredevil when I was a kid.
Right.
Reading comic books and stuff, and it's very exciting. And I hope that with the success of Spider-Man, it sort of opened up people to realizing that you can, even if you didn't grow up on comic books, you can enjoy these movies.
Enjoy it. A whole new genre, right, for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, no wonder they weren't like, Ben. Let's do another one of these bad boys. I think his star had fallen at the time, but like you said, it does not ever go away for good. He takes some time off. He is in he is in a few things here and there, but he decides to direct after that. And I think coming out with The Town and Argo in 2010 and 2012 respectively really brings him back to the forefront, in my opinion.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like you just never know, right? Because after The Town and Art, like even after those 2, he does some other movies that don't really hit, right? So people are like, well, maybe he'll only ever be good in stuff he directs, right? Maybe that's it. But then in 2014, bam, Gone Girl, a Fincher like banger, right? And it's like, oh man, and he's great in that, and he's so well used in that, And then he fucking gets to be Batman, and look, I'll just say I'm not a fan of the Ben Affleck Batman. That might have more to do with the overall direction of those movies the stories, but I don't really like that iteration. But still, he got to be Batman in a series of movies, And then he has like The Accountant, which is a movie that like, it's weird to think that movie was like a huge hit, We're getting like a sequel to that.
Yeah, it was on our list for a long time, but we're never gonna have to talk about it.
Yeah, no, they're actually going through with the sequel. So yeah, and then there's also still you look through the filmography now, there's still some other stumbles in there. He did that movie in 2022, Deep Water, that was like infamously panned. So it's just like he has his ups and downs still, but I think he's found a place where he's like known enough that you can never entirely count him out, and he'll always come back with something. And particularly since he has the filmmaking skills too, he can always kind of like save his own career if he needs to.
Did you go at it with full force, or were you at all apprehensive? After you got the
I was
blessing?
very apprehensive, and then I realized, you can't go make a movie if you're going to be. It's like rock climbing where you're looking down. You have to just throw yourself into it, embrace it, and do it the best I can. People will make comparisons. Some people will like the other movies better. There's nothing I can do about that. I try to do the best I can. I don't think I'm the next Harrison Ford. I don't think I'm the next Alec Baldwin. I'm me, and I try to do my best. And I'm proud of the movie, and there it is.
Well, you're very humble, but obviously, I mean, you're an A-list star now. I mean, you're in the caliber. But you're very humble about it.
Thank you very much. Nice talking to you, man. Nice to see you again.
I was disappointed. I never saw Deep Water, but I was disappointed he almost made a similar mistake that he did with the J-Lo relationship, making a movie together. The Ana de Armas of it all. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get it. Like, I'm not, I am a man, but it was just funny that 20 years later he kind of makes the same mistake and gets not as equally panned, but a movie that people just thought was absolute trash.
Just
weird that why he would like, what am I trying to say? Is rope his horse? What am I trying to say? What is that cliche?
I don't know what that is. I don't know. Is that a Canadian saying? I don't know. But
hitch his horse to that train. Is that?
I think you're right. It's tricky because you want to say that he is maintained and he's still this like tabloid figure, right? And his personal life is paid so much attention to, and people love to kind of like make fun of what he's going through and like mock him about it, or just at least draw attention to it. and you would think that maybe he shouldn't do any films that kind of have any parallels to that or draw attention to it. But then you can also say, well, like Gone Girl's kind of doing that though, right? Like Fincher was smart enough to realize that Ben Affleck brings a kind of baggage to him that makes him perfect for that character. But I think you're right that like doing movies with your current girlfriend or wife might not be the best idea, because that's an area of like people really, I don't know, have weird hangups about Ben Affleck and his love life, right? And like obviously he's made some poor choices that I'm sure he would admit to in that as well, with some affairs and things like that. But he shouldn't remind movie audiences of that, because it's even at the point where they like make fun of him in Deadpool and Wolverine as like just we'll all laugh at this, right? So it's like he's still, I don't know, he's still a star, but he's also still allowed to be like an easy go-to punchline for people. So like I said, he just occupies a really odd place in Hollywood.
I think also it's because he takes it. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to say he's a good sport, because I'm sure he despises it, but he's not one to lash out. He's again, he just hates being a star. I don't know.
No, I think you're right that he does take it, and I think he is a good sport about it. He's a great, he's one of the great modern SNL hosts. Every time he hosts, he's awesome. And I remember after Gigli, he did like a fantastic skit on SNL making fun of Gigli. He is willing to make fun of himself, and that's always enduring to me. Yeah. So I'm guessing other people probably like that as well. And like even and they're even like the slight stories how him and Kevin Smith had that huge falling out, but then they kind of like mended that fence and have come back together, and like that's really sweet, to see the two of them friends again and him popping up in recent Smith stuff. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of with you in that I'm always rooting for him, but it's also like I'm always worried about him, right? Because he always just does. Yeah. He always seems like he's on the precipice of like ruining it all again or shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah, like what is it? A few years ago when he was like banned from Vegas or something, like for counting cards, because he's very smart. We keep saying that, but he's also just like really humble. I wanted to throw that word. That was the word. He's a very humble guy. Even the way he got this role as Jack Ryan, right? Like he goes and talks to Alec Baldwin, and he goes to talk to Harrison Ford. Not to ask for their permission, but at least get their blessing of some kind. I think that's kind of cool. And it's the stories he tells about that. I don't think they're fake. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you hear these celebs say that kind of stuff, and you're like, you haven't fucking said one word to that bastard.
The fact that he even said like, I can't tell you what we talked about, kind of tells me it's real, right? Because he doesn't feel the need to like make up some bullshit about what they told him. He's just like, no, I had some conversations with them, and that's good enough for me,
Totally.
Yeah.
I guess another thing I wanted to mention before we get into the review was there's a lot of there was some talk and controversy that this movie was really hurt by September 11th. This movie comes out in 2002, a few months later after September 11th, and people were saying, well, they changed the book from Arab nationalists to neo-Nazis, and they changed this, they changed that. They must have done that because of September 11th, and the fact of the matter is, they did not. This was the reason why they made those changes prior to anything kind of in the conception and inception of this film is, well, one of the writers, Dan Pine, said using Arab terrorists might be cliche at this point.
Even people forget that even before 9/11 happened, there was already like committees set up that were trying to like fight this in Hollywood, right? Saying that like Arab terrorists had been used too much. And I remember that as a controversy even circling around True Lies, a movie I know we both love.
Yes.
But a movie that receives some, honestly somewhat valid criticisms about the way it depicts its villains. And so people were already sensitive of that. And so that was one of the reasons they changed it. But I know there was another reason, which I know you want to talk about as well.
Yeah. Also, Dan Pine wanted to make mention of what was rumbling around the world and Europe and Holland. Jörg Haider was starting to come into play in Austria, a neo-fascist. And there was a lot of activity in Holland, like I said, and then Spain and Italy. So he felt like this is a lasting idea that might come more to fruition. But before I go any further, I just wanted to mention something that Roger Ebert said about this movie, okay? Which I found wild. He gave this film 3.5 out of 4, okay? So he loved this movie. And he says, the use of the neo-Nazis is politically correct. Best to invent villains who won't offend any audiences. Now, isn't that a wild thing to think about in the year 2025, the year of our Lord?
It is just crazy too. And I remember, and I'm sure you saw this in research as well, that when this movie came out, one of the criticisms of it from many Clancy fans and just like, film fans and, a certain sect of them was very much like, oh, because of 9/11, they really did neuter this, right? Like it's just not, it doesn't feel real for it not to be Arab terrorists. And the fact that it's like neo-Nazis, they're not even an issue anymore, right? Like fascists, like, white supremacists, they would never be like they would never have this kind of strength, or they would never be a threat. So, when Daniel Pine says that he made that change because he felt like he saw that stuff starting to get a foothold, he ends up looking like one of the most prescient like screenwriters in the world, Yeah.
I think we should just talk about this film now. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I'll say before we get into it is you're right that you can't really say, it is true that the film was actually finished and like, I think even like locked before 9/11 or like, pretty much ready to go.
Yeah.
And so it's not true that they made any changes. But when you watch this movie, for reasons what we will talk about in just a couple minutes, you can believe that, like, boy, it sure does seem like maybe I could see why it coming out after 9/11 would hurt this movie, right?
Yeah.
And it is interesting to think that this movie was still a big hit, but I actually, maybe we'll talk about this during our review. There is a part of me that does wonder, even though it's still a hit, was it maybe affected by that? Could it have been an even bigger hit? Because I do think there's something to be said for, there's some elements of this movie that definitely felt odd watching in a post 9/11 world. So maybe that can be a good tease of what the movie is as we get into it.
Hello, Kathy.
I can't make it.
Where are you going?
I can't tell you that, Jack. Tell her where you're going. In fact, tell her who you work for. She'll be impressed.
I work for the CIA, and the director asked me at the last minute to come with him to Russia to do a nuclear arms inspection.
That is so lame.
Hello?
You're about to breathe air that's way over your pay grade, so listen up. You're going to be asked for analysis and advice, so be sure you know what you're talking about. Welcome to the CIA, sport.
At a time of increasing tension,
According to this, there are 17 senior scientists on duty today. I only count 14.
deliberate deception,
3 Russian scientists are missing. I need to know where they are.
Shut up. I don't go on the missions. I just write reports.
So write a report about it.
I'm an analyst.
I'm not trained for this.
Just be my eyes and ears.
I can't be with somebody who's going to keep their life hidden from me, Jack.
I will not let that happen.
and new enemies.
You don't fight Russia and America. You get Russia and America to fight each other and destroy each other.
Only 2 men suspect the truth.
What's a South African doing in the Ukraine with 3 Russian scientists in a crate from Israel?
Fair guess they're building a bomb.
From the electrifying bestseller by Tom Clancy.
The crate was put on a cargo freighter headed for the East Coast.
What? And the producer of Clear and Present Danger and Patriot games.
It's Ryan! The bomb is in play!
Ben Affleck.
Where's the president now?
They're taking him airborne. They think it might be the Russians.
It wasn't the Russians!
Morgan Freeman.
It adds up. You just don't like what it adds up to.
If you strike against the Russians, you sacrifice your moral authority.
We have reason to believe the bomb was the work of terrorists, not the Russians.
Get him.
Mr. President, they're scrambling the fighters.
My orders are to get the right information to the people who make the decision.
Put it in your report.
And if you shut me out, your family and 25 million other families will be dead.
The Sum of All Fears. Directed by Phil Alden Robinson.
That, listeners, was the trailer you heard, and thankfully you didn't see the trailer because it's quite spoilery. I've noticed recently older films didn't really care about spoilers. I think the marketing in 2002 really gave so much of this away. I'm so glad I didn't watch the trailer before watching the movie. Our director here, Phil Alden Robinson, is on record really hating that. And he kind of lost that battle, he says. He begged for them not to show certain scenes and elements. It drove him crazy, and the marketing team was like, screw you. Deep Impact, we saw the big wave hit New York, and it drove people to the theater. So we're going to do the same and basically spoil your movie. So he wasn't happy about that, and he definitely wasn't happy about the poster either, because he felt that the poster with Ben Affleck's face and Morgan Freeman's face, who we haven't even mentioned yet, and then a bunch of nuclear missiles, was basically a poster made for young boys who like war. And that's not the movie he sought out to make. So I wanted to get that out of the way. I'm going to read you the plot right now. When the president of Russia suddenly dies, a man whose politics are virtually unknown succeeds him. This change in political leadership sparks paranoia among American CIA officials, so CIA Director Bill Cabot recruits young analyst Jack Ryan to supply insight and advice on the situation. What Ryan discovers is that terrorists are planning to provoke a war between the U.S. and Russia, pushing both sides to the brink of mutual assured destruction.
All right. Some of all fears. That's right.
Yeah. So this is your time to shine. You fought so hard for the theme month, and I think you should start this one off. And I'm interested to hear what you have to think. I actually don't know what you're going to think.
Yeah, even I was unsure what I was going to think about it because I couldn't remember. I don't know that I've ever seen it all the way through until this viewing. I know I did not see it in the theater, and that's interesting, right? Because as you mentioned, I was a fan of the previous three, so I was kind of like trying to remember, boy, why didn't I go see this? And I think it really does play into, I probably was buying into the anti-Ben Affleck sentiment at the time. You know, like a lot of people, I did not like Pearl Harbor, and so I was probably just like, yeah, forget that guy. And also, what is this? He's not Harrison Ford. He's not Alec Baldwin. He seems too young. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But I've only ever seen pieces of it on TV, I think. You know, big chunks, but this was definitely my first time watching it from beginning to end. And I remember just always kind of thinking like, yeah, it's pretty weak compared to the other ones. Like, it doesn't grab me the same way. And there's an element of that still holds true, in that I'll say right now that I do not like this movie as much as Hunt for October or the two Harrison Ford movies. But I will say it's a movie that has aged fairly well, I think. I mean,
you don't say.
Well, it's weird, right? Because you watch it, and obviously there's so many things that we're going to talk about that are like they feel so of a moment with the you know, what's going on now, like in the world. But even putting that aside, I also mean, and I made this joke earlier about how, and we've talked about this with other movies, I was just watching this thinking like, oh my God, this movie made $200 million. They don't even allow Hollywood to make movies like this anymore, right? A movie that is just mostly scenes of awesome actors. This has a murderer's row of, hey, it's that guy character actors, just like standing in rooms and talking about a serious situation. And Hollywood audiences used to flock to these and sit there riveted and not pull out their phones and play Candy Crush and text each other and be assholes in the theater. You know, opening night, I bet you this was like sold out and people were sitting there watching this movie and getting into it. So like, that's what I mean too about it aging well, is it's kind of like just a movie, a kind of movie I miss, right? Like, we've talked about dad movies before. This is a definite dad movie. And then the last thing I'll say about it is like, you know, in terms of like story specifics. So I'm watching it, and for the most part, and I wonder if you had the same response, and I'm eager to hear, but I'm watching it and I'm thinking like, yeah, this is fine. I guess there's nothing special. It's just kind of, you know, one of those movies. It's not a very good one. It just feels really standard. And then a nuke actually goes off in America.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy shit. And I know that's the thing that they were upset that the marketing kind of gave it away. And I remember it being the big point of discussion about the movie when it came out. But man, this movie will always be the movie that had the balls to do that, you know. And you got to go back to like, you know, you got to give Tom Clancy credit because that comes right from his book. But anytime you watch a movie like this, you are always thinking, this entire movie, I'm waiting to see how the hero prevents that from happening, and he does not. It happens, and then the movie deals with it. Now, I have some thoughts about how the movie deals with it, but the fact is, it does it, and the movie even kind of takes like a different stylistic look after that for a bit, and it just feels like a little bit more, there's just more impact to everything after that. And so I kind of walked away thinking like, it's still not like my preferred Jack Ryan movie. I'm going to come down on that like wishy-washy, like it's just fine, but I actually did, you know, kind of respond to it more than I expected to. So you got to consider that a win, I guess. So yeah, I think it's a decent, you know, little spy thriller that is interesting to watch today because it feels different than what we typically get.
Yeah. I was thinking back of what was the last form of American pop culture where I saw such a devastating attack, right? Such mainstream. And you know, spoilers for I think season 6 of 24, I think. Yeah. A nuke goes off in LA. And I remember I used to watch 24 weekly. So I remember when that hit on national TV on Fox, it was like mind-blowing, right? And I hadn't seen some of All Fears before. This was my first time watch, by the way. I'm like right there with you. I think I'm a little higher. Maybe because I have less of the relationship to the other movies. Not that you're really comparing them much either. Like, so I don't want to discredit you, by the way. I'm not trying to say that. But I think that the first half of this is pretty good. And I thought the second half is riveting. And I think when you have a pretty good start, that ramps up to being like, oh my God, how are they going to solve this? I just found myself kind of on the edge of my seat. You know, right now, I guess this is a good way to put it, and this is maybe why I was feeling so maybe emotional watching the movie when that moment happens halfway through, is that it's done really, really extremely effectively with, you know, a lack of dialogue, a lack of music. It's all being in the moment with our characters dealing with the aftermath of people's decisions, right? And I think right now I texted Trev, I think yesterday or whatever, and I said, hey, you're the one that usually talks politics, and I never do. And if I do, it's very briefly. But, you know, right now I live in Canada. Trev lives in America, and it is February 3rd. And I watched this the day that President Trump announced devastating tariffs on our country and continues rhetoric on annexation and making us part of the States. And I've been filled with an extreme level of anger. My family has, my friends, everybody I know has been filled with an extreme level of just like disgust. And I've had this conversation with Trev, and you know, I think he's obviously sensed my frustration even in our text messages, right? And you know, I know Trev and our friends in the States are great people, amazing people, and are not these fucking lunatics. But we are now in a moment that, you know, the States has obviously been dealing with this for 9 years. And now we're getting into fucking Putin playbook bullshit. And now it's a whole other ballgame. Today is the 3rd. He magically, of course, pushes the tariffs another 30 days because he talked to our Prime Minister Trudeau. This is going to be hanging over us for 4 fucking years. I can just sense it, you know? Every time he gets whiny and bitchy and moany, he's going to bring it up and he's going to threaten it, and it's going to continue to scar our Canadian hearts and take off our life because this is just wild. I say all that because this movie got me quite emotional and poignant with watching world leaders discuss what the fuck to do. Mm-hmm. And there's a level of humanity that I saw in James Cromwell's, the great James Cromwell's portrayal of being the president. There's this humanity that Phil Alden Robinson gets out of him. There's a lot of scenes that are improvised. I learned in the research to be kind of frenetic and scared.
Everything all right? Jesus, Gene, how the hell do you think I am? How many casualties? We don't know. Kevin said it was Russian. How the hell did it get in there? We don't know. Radar didn't pick it up, so it wasn't a missile. Well, how is Kevin? Where is he? I don't know. Well, what do you know? I don't know, all right? I don't know. All right. Okay. I don't know, for Christ's sake.
There's a quote here from Tom Clancy. If you put the leaders of a country in a room and tell them the decisions they make might lead to blowing up the world, only a sociopath would not have an emotional reaction. And I think after watching that movie and reading that quote, I was like, we got a sociopath, brother.
You don't say.
You know? And it's like, obviously this isn't like, I know I'm banging the drum that everybody's, you know, at least 50+% of people, a lot of people are banging this drum. Okay. I'm not making any headlines here, but like, I think this movie hit me in a way that escalation is wild. It's tense. The last half of this movie hit Red October levels for me of like tension. And it's all people talking in rooms. And sometimes that's all that will stop people from pressing the fucking button. And I think when you watch something like this, I watched last night. I watched Crimson Tide. That's what I didn't tell you I watched. before we recorded, I said, Trev, I watched another movie that was kind of like this. I watched Crimson Tide for the first time last night. And the whole movie is Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman fighting over whether or not to press the fucking button and launch the nuclear war. And at the end of the movie, Trev, I don't know if you remember this, but a blurb comes up and says the singular power of making that decision from the generals has been stripped away. And the only person that can do that is the president of the United States. Almost like a, hooray, we fixed it. And I was like, oh my God, how times have fucking changed in 25 years. So I'm going to say more about the movie now. I think I'm done talking about that stuff, truly. But I thought this last half of this movie rocks for interesting ways. I'll get back to Ben Affleck. I want you to respond, obviously. So I'm sorry. I feel like I'm taking up airspace. Respond now, and then I want to talk about Ben Affleck in this role of being a young Jack Ryan.
I mean, I think it's worth talking about. Like, you don't have to like apologize for it, because the narrative thrust of the second half of this movie is watching our characters deal with this like actual thing that happened, right? And the thing that you think they're going to prevent, and then no, it's like, oh wait, it happened, and the movie's not over yet, you know. And now we're like we're watching like the ramifications of that, and it's one of the best like dramatic conceits possible for a film like this, right? And you can see it played. Like this idea, right, of we're on the precipice of nuclear war, and what can we do to prevent it or escalate it? And it can be used for great dark comedy, like in Dr. Strangelove, one of my favorite political comedies. That movie is a masterpiece, and it's the same kind of idea, right? Or it can be played for like real drama, as we see here. And I think you're so right that what makes the scenes with the president and his advisors so fascinating is, so the crux of this movie is that these neo-Nazi fascist terrorists arrange this so that a nuke goes off in America and it looks like Russia did it. And there's a new Russian president, and he's been made into a scapegoat, and they're basically trying to force a war between America and Russia. And it's really it's also interesting how much it, like, just even like ancillary elements of this feel like so of a moment, right? Because this was made during the Russian Chechenian War, and that keeps getting brought up as like why America doesn't trust Russia, because they are invading Chechnya, who was an offshoot of them, and of course we see that now with Russia and the Ukraine. So it just feels like like similar. Although Ciarán Hinds as the new Russian president is definitely more likable than fucking Putin. But what I thought was really interesting about the scenes with the president and all his advisors is that after the nuke goes off, we watch them dealing with this, right? And have this debate about like, well, we're not sure it was Russia, but it seems pretty likely it was Russia. Obviously Jack Ryan knows the truth, but he's having a hard time getting through to them. So they're trying to make these decisions, and they play it so realistically. They allow the president to get angry, right? He gets mad because he sees the attack as an attack on him. But he also still has like, a sense of, he talks about how he's like, this is not what I wanted my presidency to be. I didn't want to be the president who would like usher in a nuclear war. And I really like his council of advisors, not just again because look, it's Philip Baker Hall, Ron Rifkin, Bruce McGill, Ken Jenkins. Come on, man. Yeah. We have just all these great character actors. Yeah. But it would have been very easy to play all of them as warmongers or all of them as dissenters. But instead, they disagree, and like even some of them aren't sure of themselves, right? Some of them are like, I think this is what you should do, but actually I'm not. I don't know if it's the right call. So they're played all very human, and that. Again, I don't know. That's what again made this movie feel like so different than stuff we typically get now, because characters in big blockbusters now are all just so one note. Yes. And these are all characters who are really struggling with what's the right thing to do. Oh shit, I'm not sure. Oh my God, I think I fucked up. And it's just really interesting to watch that. And it feels so real, but it also feels like, well, at least they're competent people. Wouldn't that be nice? So that's a big element of it. So young Jack Ryan. Yeah. Okay, this is where I get it. Yeah. Okay. I'll just tell you. I'll just tell you right now, because it's probably better for me to say it, and maybe you respond, because I'm gonna have to say this is where I butt up against the movie, and I really don't think Ben Affleck is very good in this. I don't think he's a good Jack Ryan. Now, if I think he's in 15% of the movie. I know, that's really weird too, right? It's strange how it's a Jack Ryan movie, and he's like so kind of pushed aside for a lot of it. Maybe by design, is in terms of, it doesn't really make much sense for his character at this point to be allowed access to everything. So that's maybe kind of interesting and admirable for them to keep that somewhat realistic. Yeah. It doesn't do him any favors, right? As trying to be like the star of this movie. Yeah. If he had been allowed to make 2 more of these, maybe he could have grown into the role. But this is why I said I wanted to save my thoughts on Ben Affleck, because you're very, very gung-ho about Ben Affleck. Now, let me explain my complicated thoughts of Ben Affleck as a performer.
Sure.
Because I don't think he's a bad actor. However, anytime he plays a role that has any kind of sense of adult level of responsibility or authority, I kind of don't buy it, you know? So like
Sure,
him as
yeah,
a CIA
yeah.
analyst, no, man. Him as a lawyer in Daredevil, no, right? Even like when he's like Bruce Wayne, I'm like, I just don't see him as Bruce Wayne. And like you called him blue collar, and I was like, yes, that's perfect, because when he plays like the guy in the town or the guy in Good Will Hunting, I'm like, that's Ben Affleck. Right. Like, and so I don't mean there's or like Jersey Girl, right? A movie I don't love, but you know, he's just playing like a dad in that. And it's a great performance. You know, I'll say for a movie I'm not even that big on. He's really good in it. And I just don't think he's the right guy for this kind of role. I know it's weird to say because I know they're trying to play like a young, inexperienced, naive Jack Ryan. So you would say he's actually perfect for it based on what I was going to say. But I still watch the movie and I feel like you kind of get the sense he knows he's in over his head, and he never quite gets the command that I need him to in the final act when the movie needs him to step up and finally be the powerhouse. I still just don't buy it. So he just feels like a little boy playing kind of dress up in this to me, and that's what keeps it from like, you know, hitting on the same impact as like the Baldwin or Harrison Ford ones.
For sure, he doesn't have the immediate gravitas, for sure. And I think Peter Travers, famed critic, criticized his performance, saying he creates an outline for a role he still needs to grow into. A role that Harrison Ford effortlessly filled with authority. Now, I completely agree with that. Where I think I will push back a little bit is it is kind of like the origin story here. So he has to be a little bit
so
awkward.
So was Hunt for October, though, and Baldwin was better, right?
I agree. Yeah. Like, yeah, like, Alec Baldwin had like that cleverness and like that intellectual cleverness.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly think Ben Affleck has that. You might be right. But mind you, Ben Affleck is a smart guy, though, but he comes off kind of doofusy, right? So it's kind of like, I mean, would he be Jack Ryan, though? Now I'm doing a thought exercise by myself.
That's a good point. That's a good point, actually. You're right, though, because we know Ben Affleck is very intelligent. As I said, when he makes appearances on like talk shows and talks politics, he knows what he's talking about. But he like cultivates this, like you just said the word, he cultivates this like doofy on-screen persona where for some reason his real life intelligence seems like it has a hard time breaking through. It's weird because if the Ben Affleck that I saw, you know, in that like viral clip where he goes after Ben Affleck and his guests for being, you know, racist against, you know, Arab nations, if that was the Ben Affleck that was playing Jack Ryan here, I'd be like, yeah, man, this is great, you know. But for some reason, instead I'm getting the Ben Affleck that's like in Mallrats or something. It just feels weird.
What I think kind of hurt, I think it's just the characterization too of Jack Ryan in this one. I said the first half is just okay to me, and I think there's you got hot, sexy, young Hollywood movie star in the making, Ben Affleck, so you got to get him topless, and he's got to be sexier, and he's got to be dating his future wife, and they got to have a romantic date, and they got to be in bed together. And I'm not anti-romance, okay, obviously, but I think it's so underserved and undercooked and just so blatantly attempting to get that date night vibe that I was talking about, because Ben Affleck is the date night guy. It just takes away for the reason why I'm signing up to watch a Jack Ryan movie.
Yeah.
So like the romance thing just never hits for me, even though I love Bridget Moynihan. Every time I see her, I love her. But
it's funny because you mentioned one of the things that separates Jack Ryan from like the Bond thing, right? The American piece of it is like, well, he's got this wife, or he's got a wife and kids, and like that, and Kathy Muller, his wife, Kathy Ryan, eventually, she's such an important character to the franchise. But you always sense the franchise not knowing what to do with that character, right? Because they're like, well, Jack Ryan's the hero. We want to make it important that he has a wife, but like she's not going to be going on these adventures with him. Just remember everything I'm saying. Put a button on that for our next episode.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the biggest crime that this movie does to Ben Affleck's version of this character is not just what I just listed here, but I was watching this with my fiance, and she was kind of half watching it, but there was about maybe almost halfway through. The bomb hadn't gone off yet, and she said to me, "Man, there's a lot of main characters in this," and I agreed that there's so many main characters versus secondary characters that Ben Affleck just becomes, Jack Ryan is just upstaged like in every scene. You know, especially like, you know, he's up against Morgan Freeman the whole time, and Morgan Freeman is fucking. I mean, what more can be said? He's one of the all-time greats of all time, and he plays this mentor role just so perfectly, and you know, it's meaty. He's got humor to it. You know, I don't know if you know this, but Morgan Freeman has range. And
I've noticed,
he's just excellent in this film, and every time he's with Jack Ryan, he just upstaged him. And I think that hurts. If this is an origin movie, that hurts that character. Because I will mention Red October, it's very much a two-hander, right? It's very much Alec Baldwin and Sean Connery. But again, you're not an origin story at that point. It's about these two guys' lives intersecting at the worst possible time. You know, and I think that's what's interesting about that movie. While in this one, I should be watching Jack Ryan for 80% of the movie. Like, this movie stops for me to watch Liev Schreiber on a mission.
Well,
multiple missions.
I want to bring that up because I'll push that even further, because you mentioned the thing about him getting upstaged by Morgan Freeman. But like, if you are trying to have this be a Jack Ryan origin story, and also it's an important movie for Ben Affleck at this point in his career, right? Because he is still making he's been a star for a while. But this is still the early steps of him trying to make the ascension into big Hollywood blockbuster leading man, right? And so he said it's weird the movie like pushes him aside a lot. It's weird that they allow him to be upstaged by Morgan Freeman. But let's talk about even the Liev Schreiber element of it, in that, you know, as we said in Hunt for October and in the Harrison Ford movies, even though Jack Ryan is always pushed as the guy who's like, I'd rather be behind a desk, I belong behind a desk, eventually he becomes the man of action, right? And this one keeps saying like, well, when they go in the action, it's actually going to be Liev Schreiber. And like Jack Ryan still kind of takes the back seat, you know, he never really gets like a big action moment. And even the Liev Schreiber plays John Clark, who's also an important Jack Ryan character. He is like the James Bond of this universe, right? He's the CIA special agent who basically does the dirty work that Ryan just advises on. And we've seen him before in this franchise. Even Willem Dafoe played him in the Harrison Ford ones. But the thing was, by the time we got to him in the Harrison Ford ones, we were already like 3 movies in, you know. And to have it be like your origin one, and to have this like cool character keep showing up and be like the badass, and you're like, I want to watch this guy, you know, like this guy rules. Like, this guy is like funny. He's like, he's got this like dark past, apparently. He's like dangerous. He's like sexy. It's like, well, why aren't we watching this guy? So that like doesn't do Jack Ryan or Ben Affleck any favors either, right? And so like, and it's just interesting watching that too, knowing that like they kept trying to like this idea of like, well, eventually we'll make John Clark movies as well, and they finally did with Michael B. Jordan. To be determined whether we will do that movie someday. There's talk of potentially sequel. I'll believe it when I see it. But but yeah, I think Liev Schreiber actually rules in this as John Clark. But again, that's not doing Affleck any favors, because John Clark is getting all of the action and the cool moments like that.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Also,
It's hard to start your origin film and your start of your brand new franchise with nukes and Nazis, because like, where do you go from there? You know, in Hollywood, I guess blockbusters, this, like, I don't know if we call this a blockbuster, but you know, they're really throwing everything at the wall here. So how do they go bigger? But then also, if you want Jack Ryan to continue and become much more Harrison Fordy, I guess, and much more commanding rooms, I mean, how do you even go smaller for like audiences to tune in? Do you know what I'm trying to get at? Like, it's kind of they've played their hand too quickly with something so astronomical. Like, I think this hits so many of the thrills that I want from a movie like this. You know, you set off a bomb in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Like, what's the next threat? The same thing? You know, I don't know. I don't really know where they go with this.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And also, I think the movie doesn't... I agree that the second half of this movie is obviously much better. And the movie just picks up like so much more excitement and thrills and tension in the second half. But I also feel like it's kind of strange how they never actually do tell you like an actual death toll of what happened. And I feel like the movie doesn't go all the way in showing like the ramifications of this nuke. And, you know, honestly, maybe that was for the best in a directly post 9/11 environment. And I know that's just by happenstance.
Right.
Maybe if the movie went like super in depth on that, audiences really wouldn't be able to handle it. But like with the distance of it, now I watch it and the nuke goes off and you're like, holy shit. But then even though that makes the movie more exciting and there's a lot of great stuff with it, like after that, you know, the movie ends and there's just like this dedication ceremony on the lawn of the White House, and then we cut to like Jack Ryan and his fiance like having a nice picnic by the White House, and you're kind of like, I don't know, man, I'm not really feeling like the devastating impact of that nuke that went off in America earlier.
Yeah,
And I know it's like a smaller nuke, you know, so that feels like kind of like half-hearted a little bit too. And again, maybe they just felt like they had to do that so that movie wasn't so oppressive and depressing. But you know, that is an element that probably calls for that. So. What's strange about your question, though, about where they go from here is kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, I guess. But we should say, you know, as we mentioned, there's no sequels to this. And then we're going to look at Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit, which is another attempt to reboot with a Jack Ryan origin story with Chris Pine. Obviously, we're covering it, so it's not a spoiler to say that one doesn't get sequels either.
Yeah.
And then they made a Jack Ryan TV show for Amazon with John Krasinski, which I haven't seen all of, but what I've seen I quite like. And I might even make the argument that maybe Krasinski is the best on-screen Jack Ryan, right? But it's what they have not done yet. I guess maybe none of these have had the traction or whatever, but they never seem to want to push it to where the books went, where I don't know if you know this, if you've done any research on it, but Jack Ryan ultimately becomes the president in the books.
Yeah.
And that is because of a terrorist attack, right? He's like the head of the CIA, and then a huge terrorist attack in Washington, D.C., like basically wipes out the entire government to where he is just next in line. And then he becomes president. And it's like, well, that's very, very interesting. I've never read the books, but I've always been kind of compelled by that idea, you know? And I know that's like a point where like, well, he is just the president, so of course he's not getting involved in the action scenes, but that is why you have John Clark. And that's also when they introduced Jack Ryan Jr., his son, who kind of takes over as like the more action character. And it's just like, man, it's weird that they've never even like, every time they want to come back to this franchise, they're like, well, let's just reboot it with Jack Ryan again. Let's restart the Jack Ryan story. And it's like, maybe it's time to like get to that old Jack Ryan and get into like that stuff, you know?
Good luck.
I know.
I mean, that's just we're so far from that. Oh my God! Like I'm obviously with you, like in every respect, but ain't nobody gonna sign up a new Jack Ryan unless they can get 3 to 6 movies out of them.
No,
you know.
Well, even and I think I've heard. Have you heard this? Well, I've heard rumors that like even with Krasinski, like they did 3 seasons of the show and it ended, but they have talked about just having Krasinski come back for some movies now, just keeping him going in that role. Right. So you would think maybe that's where that could go, but I just don't. I get the feeling that they'll always be hesitant to say like, let's just put him behind a desk in the Oval Office. You know, they'll always want him as like a more of an action character.
That's funny now that I'm thinking about it. Harrison Ford playing Jack Ryan, and then Jack Ryan becoming the president, and then the next Harrison Ford movie he's in is in a week or so, playing the president in Captain America.
Yeah.
There's your movie right there. Jack Ryan became the Hulk and fucked things up. And
I think at some point Disney will just buy the rights to Jack Ryan and he'll become a Marvel character. Yeah.
Also, I do like the fact that they named his kid Jack Ryan Jr., so his initials are just JR. Wow. Wow, Tom. Get it together. Again, I'm with you. I just genuinely think that will never, ever, ever happen. Like, we're never going to get a 60-year-old actor to start a movie in Jack Ryan being like, we're at the moment. Right? Like
honestly, I don't even think like even if those Krasinski ones happen, I feel like they'll be TV movies, right? I think the success of that show has maybe just told them, maybe this is the place for Jack Ryan, right? We can't really compete with Bond on like a big kind of global scale. So we had our moment, right? And that's the thing is their moment was in this time when these kind of more intelligent, differently paced, you know, slower paced, less action thrillers could still be big box office hits. And that's not the case anymore, right? So there's no call to make a movie like Sum of All Fears today. So Jack Ryan is probably going to remain a small screen property for a while. And that's I mean, I'm fine with that too, as long as we get more, but it's a little sad. It's sad to watch this movie, and however I feel about it, as I said, I just think like, man, we lost something when we stopped making these kind of movies and drawing in audiences for them.
We've talked fairly recently about that, you know, like about how the dad thriller, the dad movie, right?
Yeah, it's come up with like the Bone Collector, or even something like Salt, you know, like these like smaller, like, you know, little like thrillers, you know.
Is Philip Noyce making movies right now?
He is. He's still at it.
Okay.
He made a movie, I believe, last year or the year before that we might cover on here someday.
Oh, okay.
Fast Charlie with Pierce Brosnan.
Right. Oh, yeah. And it failed. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's really
As
not.
I said,
It's really not working here.
Yeah. Can I quickly ask too, just because I think
Sure.
it's interesting. We keep talking about all like the real world, like how it's you watch this today and you're like, oh my god, it's about fascists. It was so ahead of its time because that guy was right. They are they're that's the big threat today. We got the Russian element of it, which feels so of a moment. Is there any part of you that does? Because I was wondering when you were going on your whole like political discussion earlier, and you were saying how angry you are at Trump in America right now, and as I said, rightfully so. I'm no supporter of that doofus and these policies, but when you watch a movie then where the hero is the American government, and in particular, I don't know, maybe that's like too crazy of a question to ask you. Like, can you like get into a movie that presents America as the good guys? But even beyond that, doesn't it feel weird to watch a movie today? And again, it just seems weird that this is like isn't the CIA great?
No,
it's
I know
so
exactly.
like rah about the CIA, that government organization that is so clandestine and covert and really like just fucks with governments all over the world and are terrible, but they're our heroes, and the movie even ends with this, what I think, and I liked it, this amazing montage of like the CIA and other government entities like that just like brutally murdering our villains. But I love that sequence, but you do watch it and go like, oh yeah, like there's just a time where like we were like, yay, they're the good guys. And I think that's an element of complication that it's like a little tougher to make in a movie today too.
Your question is interesting because of obviously what's going on, but I had that feeling watching Crimson Tide. Again, last night I watched it on the eve of all this fucking craziness. And I love the movie. I can objectively say that movie's great. And in my 4-star rating system, I gave it 4. I mean, I was like, this is expert pacing, set design, fucking old school Hollywood gravitas. Like this is a fucking movie, And I think that's where I come down to it. I recognize that I'm watching a Hollywood con job of what America pretends to be. And I'm not trying to talk shit, well, to the good Americans that are listening right now, and you know who you are. It's hard for me to pop my fist in the air, for sure. Mm-hmm. When Crimson Tide, when the credits rolled on that movie, I didn't get that feeling that maybe would have been there, 9 years ago even. But it is complicated. Like, I'm trying to put it into words because it's a weird feeling I had watching that movie. That am I really rooting for the one maybe smart guy on this boat to not destroy the world?
Well, that's why these kind of work.
I don't even know, right?
That's why these kind of work, though, right? Because like the Denzel Washington character in Crimson Tide and like every version of Jack Ryan, what they represent is they're supposed to be like the better angels, right?
Yes,
like
yes.
They're the people who actually are smart and have the right answers. It's the Captain America element, right? Where
you're right.
There was just some dumb recent controversy where Anthony Mackie made a very good point where he was just talking about how he's like, I think Captain America represents a lot of elements, but I don't necessarily think America should be one of those. I think he represents, fairness and equality and all these things that people are like, how dare you say that? And I think it's like, well, no, first of all, Chris Evans has made the same point, and so has Captain America many times in the comics and in the previous MCU movies, right? He doesn't represent blind patriotism. He represents what America is supposed to represent and what it's supposed to mean. And that's not always the case, but that's why these movies work, because it's like we have heroes like Jack Ryan who are like, oh yeah, these guys have the right answers and they're smart and they don't rush to conclusions and they don't say, hey, let's bomb Russia to smithereens because it's clear they're the bad guys. They go, hey, wait a minute. Let's think about this for a second. Let's try and find the actual villain and go after the right villains, So yeah, but I say that, and again, only complicated by the fact that it's very funny when you're like, yes, but that better angel works for the CIA, which is like a very funny and ridiculous idea.
It's interesting because during all this, I had a guys' night a couple of weeks ago, and we were in the Uber talking about all the 51st state rhetoric, right? And one of my friends is very anti-capitalist right now. And first and foremost, I'm a business guy. I've been working in business to business sales my entire life. I'm very much capitalism in that way. But I also recognize that billionaires shouldn't be a thing that exists, like when is enough? So we were talking and I said to him, this really pisses me off as a Canadian. And he, started saying, well, that sounds like nationalism. And I said, well, no. I distinguish two different things, nationalism versus patriotism. And I said, right now, I'm very patriotic and extremely proud to be Canadian. And I think when you steep into nationalism, you get to what's going on in the States with a large group of people where it's becoming dangerous. It's becoming twisted. It's becoming evil. Fuck it. It's becoming evil. And patriotism is fine. You should be proud of where you are. I've talked for four plus years about being a proud Canadian, a proud Italian Canadian, proud half Ukrainian person as well. And, I am proud of where I came from and where my families have come from and where we've lived and had an incredible life. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But when you steep into this nationalism and you steep into this extreme version of patriotism, this America first junk, even in Canada, it's starting Canada first junk. It's like it leads to nothing good. And, in this movie, there's a moment where we sit with the fascist leader and he explains why and how fascism grows so easily nowadays.
Most people believe the 20th century was defined by the death struggle of communism versus capitalism, and that fascism was but a hiccup. Today we know better. Communism was a fool's errand. The followers of Marx gone from this earth, but the followers of Hitler are bound and thrive. Hitler, however, had one great disadvantage. He lived in a time when fascism, like a virus, like the AIDS virus, needed a strong host in order to spread. Germany was that host. But strong as it was, Germany could not prevail. The world was too big. Fortunately, the world has changed. Global communications, cable TV, the internet. Today the world is smaller. And the virus does not need a strong host in order to spread. This virus is airborne.
To think that movie was written and shot in 2002, it's just too perfect. It's too perfect. And the people that are sitting idly by thinking it's no big deal, it's a really wild thing. So again, here goes one of my diatribes. I rarely do this. I rarely pull a Trev and go on a little bit of a monologue. His are more well thought out. I will say that. Mine are more of a babbling of a madman. But yeah, I think American patriotism is fine. It is a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think Hollywood's portrayal of patriotism is a good thing. And I'm for it. Like some of my fucking favorite movies and favorite filmmakers show that all the time. And I think it should be celebrated. But I think it's when it goes too far. And in real life. So to answer your question about rooting for the CIA agents and a bombing of bad countries in their minds, complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun thing to talk about. It's not, look, it's to keep with the Affleck of it all. It's the Batman discussion, right?
Yes, yes.
We don't want vigilantes in real life, but we're allowed to root for Batman because we have the benefit of, as a fictional character, knowing he's always in the right. Whereas we don't ever have that benefit in real life. And with Jack Ryan, we have the benefit of Tom Clancy creating a fictional character who is always heroic and always has the best intentions in mind, even though he works for this organization that is specifically created to spy on people and overthrow governments and install American interests everywhere, right? But that's not what Jack Ryan's about. Jack Ryan's just about getting to the truth and getting to the real soul of the matter, and we can cheer that on even as we go. Oh yeah, that's why these are fiction,
Right. That was perfectly said and succinctly said, and I thank you for buttoning up my my long-winded answer.
I mean, do we want to clear the air and talk a little bit about Jerry Goldsmith and the fantastic work he's done in the Star Trek franchise? Nice. Also the score for this as well. So
you son of a bitch. I can't say anything bad about Jerry Goldsmith, but I can say something bad about you. Yeah, no, he's great. Always great. One of the best. Best. Okay, let's wrap up with our question we like to ask. The sum of all fears with Ben Affleck as this character of Jack Ryan. Would you have wanted to see sequels? Does it deserve sequels?
This is a strange one, right? I was actually kind of fearing this question this time because I don't really. The sum of all fears. I don't know how to answer because we always frame this question as, does it deserve a sequel? And I would say, based on box office, and the fact that this is already a successful franchise, and obviously people still like these books and the characters hung around, you would argue that yes, it probably did. And maybe despite my hesitations about Affleck's version of this character, maybe he should have been given a couple more goes to see if he could grow into it. So I would say I'm going to give a complicated. I'm going to be wishy-washy. I'm going to be unfair here. I'm going to say yes, it deserved one. But I didn't personally need one. I kind of walked away from it going like, it's fine that this is just a singular one. It's fine that they decided to reboot again, I suppose. I'm not upset that this didn't get any sequels, but I do think on a pure business perspective, I'm surprised they didn't do another one, other than the fact that, as we said, Affleck's career just really kind of crashed and burned after this.
Okay, I'm going to rephrase something then. Would you want to see Ben Affleck today, 2025's Ben Affleck, as Jack Ryan in a similar thought exercise as what you thought of, like 10 minutes ago?
No, I don't. No. And I said, this is not a big slam on Ben Affleck. I'm not coming down on Ben Affleck. It's just, again, there are certain kind of roles I do not think he excels in, and this would still be one. I still think I would have that same disconnect from it. I think Krasinski's doing a fine job in the role right now. Whether he gets to do any more, I'm good with this one and done from Affleck. Yeah.
Same here. I know I liked it a little more than you did, but I think it is a good singular effort. I don't, especially since spoilers, Morgan Freeman's character gets killed, and I think that is a mistake. I think I would have liked to see him mentor Jack Ryan for at least another movie. Don't kill him just yet, and. So you wouldn't get exactly the same fun, interesting dynamic in the sequels. So yeah, I think for those reasons too, I think it deserved, objectively, it probably deserved a sequel, but subjectively, this is good. This is good for me.
I'll further complicate it by saying, I do think they should have, at this point, earlier on in 2002, they should have pulled the trigger on a John Clark movie with Liev Schreiber. Because I think even in his brief appearances in this, I think he shows that he might have had something, like given a whole movie as that character.
Disney execs in 10-episode miniseries. John Clark, 1 episode every 2 weeks. It'll take 7 years to watch.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, I mean, look, you make that joke, but that character is already, like, Michael B. Jordan has the rights to that character right now, and it's already like in this modern landscape, it has just been relegated to the streaming wasteland. So, of course. As is the Jack Ryan show, honestly. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't really speak to that or your history with that show either, but I know I watched the first season and I quite enjoyed it. My dad, of course, stayed with the whole show. That's the target audience. He loved it. I never went back though, just purely because of time. That's all.
I watched the first 2 and liked them quite a bit, and I just didn't get around to the third one. But I still mean to, and I certainly. It's not like I heard anyone say the third was like horrible or anything, right?
No,
so I thought it was very, very good.
Yeah. Okay. That'll do it for The Sum of All Fears. I say check it out. So if you haven't seen it, we spoiled the fuck out of it, but
I do too, right? Like I'm not like over the moon about it, but I do think, especially if you've heard it's like the bad Jack Ryan movie or whatever, I would think it's worth checking out today just because it is kind of fascinating how well it's aged for the various reasons we've talked about. So it's an intriguing watch nowadays, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't really want to speak to where I'd place it yet because I think in the next episode when we talk about Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit from 2014, I think we will do a ranking of the franchise.
Yeah.
So
and without giving away any thoughts on it or anything, and I believe you've seen that one maybe, but I think we could at least say that Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit. What'll be exciting about this is it's a very different kind of movie. It's a very different approach to this franchise. Oh yeah. So that's gonna be fun to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Follow us at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2 FPod on all the socials, even X. Not happy about it, but we're there. And Meta and Facebook and Instagram. There's no way around it. So like us there, like us everywhere. And rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be great. A 4-star general rating, if you will.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
Although we'd rather get that 5-star, but that's
FebruaRYAN. Off to a good start. It's nice to watch a real movie.
That's the thing too. Maybe I was just kind of happy because we weren't watching these bullshit mutant movies. So, although a nuke did go off and there was nuclear fallout. And there's even a moment where they tell Ryan, like, as long as you stay east, all the fallout's blowing west. There was a potential for mutants in this movie. He could have gone to the city and fought a bunch of mutated people.
I'd like to think that Mutant Chronicles was actually the sequel to this.
Oh yeah, it's the same continuity. This was the beginning of that all. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. See you later. That was good. I really like that.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't go off on too much of a diatribe.
No,
that
it's
like
fine.
if I bored you or anything. I felt it was like this movie was so poignant for so many reasons that I was like, it almost
fun,
felt like
we've never had an episode that feels so of a moment, and I think it's fun to get to do one of those.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was really affected by those, by James Cromwell's performance. I thought he was excellent. I thought he was absolutely excellent.
Oh, I forgot to mention he's also in Star Trek First Contact. God damn it, I'm off my game.
Oh, you son of a bitch. You know what? Actually, there's a lot of this cast. I think most people are like. Isn't that like a thing? Like most people have been on Star Trek or Law and Order. Isn't that a thing?
It's likely that if New York actors, almost all of them have been on Law and Order at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. James Cromwell is just a vegan now, right? That's what he's usually doing. He's just picketing vegan shops.
Yeah,
or did he die?
He goes to he's still alive, but he goes to
yeah.
he gets arrested at protests still. He's like 90. He'll go to protests and get arrested. Yeah,
that's what he is.
I forgot to directly mention. I did mention the style changing. I did really like that moment where after the nuke goes off and Affleck is getting out of the helicopter and they just drop out all the music and the sound.
Oh yeah,
and all you hear is the wind. I thought that was great.
I did mention something like I liked with the lack of music and dialogue.
Yeah,
I think No, all that stuff was really like sitting in the moment was really, really well done.
I wanted to ask, because this is your first time seeing it, like how surprised were you when the nuke went off? Like,
I think I was more surprised because I think I had like kind of read a little bit, like with the research and stuff. Like they're like, a bomb does go off in Baltimore or something. So I was kind of maybe ready for it, but I think the effectiveness of it was just how they did it. Like the scene from like the camera angle in the hospital, and just the quick second of everybody getting blown away, and I thought the effect was really good too. Like especially for the time, I thought like the mushroom cloud like looked really good too. I was like, wow, okay, it's funny because it looks good, but it's almost like a sense of uncanny valley because you're not used to seeing that visual in an American city.
Yeah.
So it's almost like your brain is telling you that that's fake. Do you know what I mean?
Not yet.
Well, yeah.
I'll tell you what, especially for 2002, Jack Ryan's got a really good cell phone plan because he has no problem making calls with his cell phone, even in the nuclear fallout, Baltimore running around.
Yeah, the worst connection was in the airplane.
Yeah.